Marvel World Unleashed, Villain Resurrects Ancient Gods from Myth. Like, share and subscribe. Episode 11. New York, Brooklyn. Liang, who was thrown in the bookstore, had seen through the power of the system what was happening at S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters. He appreciates Nick Fury's vigilance against the Cthulhu statue. Worthy of being the king of agents. The nickname is apt. If the other party insisted on unveiling the statue of Cthulhu after hearing Natasha's report, then Liang had to wonder if this Nick Fury was impersonated by aliens. He also noticed that Nick Fury was trying to find information about Cthulhu. It's time to move forward with the next step, Liang whispered to himself. Immediately, his fingers moved slightly, and a blank book floated into his hand. As Liang's thoughts turned, written records began to appear on the blank book. An evil aura gradually grew stronger with the appearance of these words. If ordinary people saw these words at this moment, they would scream and shout on the spot. That's not enough information to be seen by ordinary people. Just as hell is naturally separated from earth, the contents of books are things that ordinary people cannot peep into. The exterior cover of books is also changing. Originally, it was not the most ordinary thin paper, but now its cover has changed to rustic brown craft paper, and it is protected by a thick gray cardboard as a cushion. It's like the covers that those heavy tomes have. Immediately after that, a mysterious and evil pattern appeared on the surface of this quaint brown craft paper. It is an extremely chaotic and complex shape, with ever-changing lines forming patterns that people cannot understand. It seems to portray a mysterious space that does not exist in the material universe, and it seems to portray some kind of terrifying creature that cannot be observed. But anyway, after all, this is a pattern that ordinary people cannot see. Ordinary people who are too naive in their minds will inevitably fall into mental confusion when they see this pattern. Over time, their minds will slowly become broken. Finally, a line of words appeared above the evil cover. It is a text depicted in Old English, and the translated meaning is The Book of the Dead. A string of authors' names was then inscribed below the title, also in Old English. When the title and author's name all appear, Liang's operation is over. The Book of the Dead fell from the air to his hand. He flipped through it casually to check the contents, and the corners of his mouth subconsciously curved, like a devil expecting chaos to happen. Previously, the system had a prompt when introducing the fabrication function. Leon's own power cannot directly do something similar to changing human cognition in the process of fabrication. But doing side helper things is allowed. Just like now. An evil and ancient book was created by him. Among the grammar mythology, the Book of the Dead is definitely the most well-known work. In the original, this evil book was compiled by Abdul al-Haslaid, an Arab around the 8th century BC. The book describes the unspeakable knowledge and unknowable existence of the grammar mythology. Therefore, it was borrowed by various people in the original work. And now in this Marvel world. This evil book was created by Leon. But this is not the Book of Necrons in the true sense. This is just a forgery that Liang used his second-order ability to imitate. He deliberately made the information in the book extremely incomplete. There are only a few words about the existence of Azathos, Yog-Sothoth, etc. He left only a few pieces of information useful in driving the current fabrication. For example, some information about Cthulhu. If he wants to create a true Book of the Dead, then Leon must do so with the help of influence points. After all, the knowledge contained in the real Book of the Dead is as vast as the universe. It was too difficult for Liang to create such a book solely by imagination. However, for now, this botched fake is enough to move the story forward. Inside S.H.I.E.L.D. Nick Fury fell into thought after reviewing all the S.H.I.E.L.D. information to no avail. After some time of deliberation, he made a decision. Coulson, gather some reliable agents and get them concentrated in the underground lab. Coulson on the other end of the phone heard it and immediately agreed. A moment later, inside the underground laboratory of S.H.I.E.L.D., Nick Fury and Phil Coulson stood at the front of the lab. And in front of them were 6 agents waiting in strict formation. They are wearing special radiation protection equipment. At the same time, the eyes are wearing special sunglasses, which can resist psychic interference to a certain extent, which is an experimental equipment developed by S.H.I.E.L.D. for some mutants. Anti-radiation plus anti-psychic interference, this is the best protection that Nick Fury can think of at present. I believe you should have guessed that there is a very dangerous mission that you need to perform, and I can't explain to you what the consequences of this mission will be, but I need you to do your best. Nick Fury's words made the 6 agents in front of him look more serious. But none of them objected. Then Nick Fury gestured to Coulson, and then pressed a button for convenience. Then a passage appeared on the laboratory floor. Your task is to collect all kinds of information about the statue located in the underground space, and all the details cannot be missed, and I will maintain voice contact with you at any time during this process. Also remember, if any of you have vertigo or hallucinations, you must report it to me immediately, understand? Nick Fury said coldly. Yes, Chief. The agents replied solemnly. Okay, let's act. With Nick Fury's order, the agents began to slowly walk into the passage. When they reach the end, they see an enclosed space, and in the center of that space, an object wrapped in cloth is placed. At this time, Nick Fury's voice came from the headphones. Pull the cloth down slowly and you will see the statue in its entirety. The leading agent stepped forward on orders. When he pulled the cloth down, the evil and strange statue reappeared in the air. An indescribable emotion began to slowly arise in the hearts of the agents. They are inexplicably a little anxious, but the impact is not too great. Then they also immediately collected various details about the statue. Click, click, click. The sound of the shutter continued, but the footsteps of the agents were silent. Nick Fury on the floor patiently waited for the report of his subordinates. His appearance looked as usual, but his heart was faintly worried and uneasy. He only hoped that the equipment on those agents could guard against the weirdness of that statue. Episode 12. 24 minutes had passed since the agents went down to collect information about the statue. This is the time that Coulson reports to Nick Fury as he looks at his watch. During these 24 minutes, the agents did not report anything unusual. This relieved Nick Fury's somewhat uneasy heart. It seems that the equipment is still useful. Nick Fury made a preliminary judgment in his heart. At this time, the voice of the agent came from his earphones. Report Director, we are almost finished with the collection, can we return? Yes. Nick Fury replied. Moments later, 6 agents walked out of the underground passage one by one. How do you guys feel down there? Did you feel anything unusual when you saw that statue? Nick Fury asked. Then the 6 agents gave a report each. Their words all mentioned the emotions associated with anxiety. Now what? Nick Fury asked again. Agents say it's much better now. This made Nick Fury have some guesses in his mind. It seems that as long as you stay away from the vicinity of the statue, you can gradually return to normal. He didn't know if that guess was correct, but at least it seemed so now. He then asked the 6 agents to put all the collected details on the table, and let them all leave. In this empty underground laboratory, only Nick Fury and Coulson remained. Coulson asked, puzzled. Chief, what the hell is that statue? I don't know yet. Nick Fury's words surprised Coulson. After all, there aren't many situations where Nick Fury can say such things. Wash out all the photos of the statues in the camera, pay attention to the whole process of wearing protective equipment, and then gather some experts involved in this area, send them the photos for them to study. I need them to give me a detailed report in a short time. Yes, sir. Just as Coulson was about to leave, he suddenly thought of something, and then asked. Do those experts need to give them protective gear? Nick Fury nodded. Coulson was gone completely. In the huge underground laboratory, only Nick Fury was left. He picked up a note on the table. On the note is a strange and bizarre symbol. It was an inscription found by an agent from the statue, specially imitated and written on paper. Nick Fury looked at this strange symbol and wondered, what is this statue? Cthulhu, Lalai, believers. Strange things flashed through Nick Fury's mind one after another. Now he only hopes that the next experts can surprise him. It's been a whole day since Coulson called the experts. In these 24 years, the experts did not give Nick Fury a satisfactory answer. About the manufacturing process of the statue, the approximate age judgment, the meaning of that string of inscriptions. None of this information has been answered. In this situation, the experts once again made a request to Nick Fury. They wanted to be able to see the statue in person. And not just by looking at photos like this. Nick Fury had refused such requests many times before, but this time he chose to agree after a long silence. Because he also hopes to get some useful information soon. However, for this group of experts, Nick Fury also made a request. That is, they are absolutely not allowed to take off their protective equipment while observing the statue. Under this premise, the experts finally entered the underground space to conduct a close-up study of the statue. This time, they gave a useful piece of information. As for the approximate date of the statue, they speculate that it must be more than 1,500 years ago. This is the result of measurements using carbon-14. This information surprised Nick Fury. 1,500 years ago. At that time, North America was still the domain of Indians. Could it be that this statue is an ancient relic of the Indians? But then another discovery by this group of experts allowed Nick Fury to overturn the guess in his mind. They found traces of a process in which the statue was made that far exceeded modern technology. This made Nick Fury feel very. But when he watched an expert cut the surface of the statue with a small cutter, he couldn't hurt the statue for half a minute. Nick Fury was stunned. A relic from more than 1,500 years ago, but with a craftsmanship that modern tools cannot hurt half of it. This immediately reminded Nick Fury of some aliens who visited Earth in ancient times. Thinking of this, Nick Fury realized the preciousness of this statue. After all, many of the black technologies of modern S.H.I.E.L.D. come from alien technologies that have been inadvertently left on Earth. After thinking about it, Nick Fury made a bold decision. He wants to send more experts to study the statue. He believes that by wearing protective gear and changing researchers regularly every day, a situation similar to Barnstable County can be avoided. So under his order, the number of experts studying the statue was expanded to 30. With the increase in the number of people, the progress of research has indeed accelerated. But a situation that Nick Fury did not expect appeared. Episode 13. Inside an underground laboratory in S.H.I.E.L.D. This is the site of research on the Cthulhu statue. Experts shuttling back and forth are wearing protective equipment and comparing ancient books from around the world. They tried to find some information from it that involved the bizarre inscriptions on the statue. Perhaps this can be used to decipher the inscription. This operation has been going on for some time. But progress has not been impressive. Although the experts still have plenty of patience, Nick Fury is no longer as focused on this place as before. After all, S.H.I.E.L.D. still has various things for him to deal with. And just today, a specialist named Robert accidentally fell while walking. His fingers inadvertently touched the statue in the center of the basement, but fortunately he only wiped the edges and did not knock it down. Colleagues smiled at Robert's clumsy behavior and then turned their heads. Robert stood up with some pain. He slapped his body, and just as he slapped it, he noticed a wound on his right index finger. It was a small wound less than 3 millimeters in size. Robert probably scratched it just by accidentally rubbing it somewhere, so he didn't care too much. He simply wiped the blood from the wound and then continued to work. No one noticed the tiny bloodstains on the statue. Quietly, the blood slowly seeped into the statue. About 5 minutes later, Robert suddenly felt that something was wrong. He felt that his eyes were a little jerky, accompanied by a slight pain. Robert thought it was the result of staying up late last night, so he asked his colleague to help him with eye drops, then leaned his head behind his chair and waited for the burning sensation of the eye drops to pass. But at this moment, a sleepiness that came from nowhere swept through his mind. In the next second, his consciousness went into sleep. When his consciousness regained itself, Robert came to a strange space. There was no light here, it was dark and oppressive, and when he waved his hand, he could feel the obvious resistance of the water flow. Robert suspects that he came to the bottom of the sea. And it was at this moment. A green glow filled his eyes. This light made Robert unable to see clearly, but it also made him feel an inexplicable sacredness and reverence. This made Robert want to bow down and kneel for it. When the green light that filled his eyes finally dissipated, Robert he saw. He saw things he had never seen in his life. It was also the most shocking thing in his life. It was a creature as huge as a mountain, sitting on a throne somewhere, his eyes as mysterious and terrifying as the stars in the universe, and countless tentacles spreading down from his great and indescribable body, which contained a mighty power that could easily disturb the stars. A pair of flesh wings stuck in his back. Although they converge at this time, it is enough to imagine what it will be like when it is opened. It will be like covering the sky. Robert could not see the face of the great being, and the only thought in his heart at this time was to kneel to him and offer his most loyal faith. The huge and chaotic stone temple emitted a green light behind the great being, illuminating the dark deep sea and setting off the great and sacred figure of the great being. That's a real God. That is a God who is enough to save everything, enough to destroy everything, enough to subvert everything. Yes. Great God, I willingly be your believer, please give me your name, and I will worship you day and night. Robert fell into a madness, and his face became distorted and strange at this time. It's chilling. And at this moment, a divine voice from the underworld drilled into Robert's mind. In the eternal mansion Lalai, the sleeping Cthulhu sleeps in your dreams. It is a language beyond human comprehension. It's like a quiet voice from the depths of the universe, or a whisper of the consciousness of the stars. When Robert heard the divine voice, he opened his eyes again. This time, what he saw was the ceiling of the underground lab. In the next second, the corners of Robert's mouth hooked a weird smile. At the same time, the screams of others suddenly sounded. Oh my God. Robert. Robert turned into a monster. My God, what the hell is going on here? Fac, hurry up and contact the director. With one scream after another, Robert slowly stood up. By this time, his figure had changed into a monster similar to the bishop monster that Natasha had killed. But the original bishop monster still has some human characteristics in its head, and now Robert has completely transformed into a terrifying fishman monster. The evil bloodthirsty aura, accompanied by a strong fishy smell, filled the entire underground laboratory. Hello, my former colleagues. Robert looked at the expert in front of him and showed a strange and terrifying smile. In the next second, the killing is complete. Episode 14. When Nick Fury rushed to the underground lab, Robert was already tied up. On his body were tied layer after layer of bondage, letting Robert struggle to no avail. Looking at the monster in front of him, Nick Fury's brows condensed a knot. Then he looked at Coulson on the side. The other party was a little messy, and there was a little blood stained on the sleeve, obviously after a fight. What's going on the spot? Nick Fury asked. Coulson replied with some gritted teeth. All the idle research experts died, 1 security guard died and 3 were injured. After hearing Coulson's report, Nick Fury's dignified face was as if brushed with a layer of soy sauce. Fac. What exactly happened? Is there any monitoring? Nick Fury scolded and then looked at Coulson. Coulson also flashed to reveal the monitoring screen. This is the surveillance at that time, Chief, you better take a look yourself. Nick Fury came to the surveillance. There is still no scene before the incident on the screen, and everything is still calm. Robert on the screen is still sleeping. And the moment the other party's eyes opened, the peace was broken. I saw that the other party's body suddenly changed a lot. His skin clicked and cracked, and the dark green and cuticle skin replaced the original human skin, and then his height began to rise, and at the same time the other party's head changed. As if it had swelled in the heat, his head became huge and hideous in the blink of an eye, and his facial features also went to a fish-like terrifying posture, with fin and barbs. When Robert is completely transformed into a monster, the one-sided carnage begins. The remaining 29 experts were killed by him as if they were chopping melons and cutting vegetables, scattered intestines and splashed brain pulp all over the ground, and severed limbs and blood stained the ground with a disgusting oil painting. People with slightly weaker psychological endurance will even be unable to sleep for days and nights when they see this scene. But Nick Fury always kept his face intact. Then the content on the screen changes. It was the image of security guards coming to confront Robert. In the footage, the security personnel shoot at Robert, but it does not have much effect, just makes Robert's movements a little stiffer. While the security personnel were shocked, Robert once again inflicted casualties on the security personnel. Fortunately, several security personnel carried high-powered stun guns, and it was under multiple electric shocks that Robert fell. This is the end of the surveillance screen. Nick Fury looked back at Robert, who was restrained, his expression gloomy and solemn. He had also seen all the videos of Natasha's previous actions. That bishop monster was obviously easily solved by bullets, but Robert in front of him could resist unhindered. What's the difference? Can he still talk now? Nick Fury pointed at Robert and looked at Coulson and asked. But before Coulson could answer, Robert spoke hoarsely and coldly angrily. Don't think that everything will be fine if you bind me, you humans will be destroyed after all, and when the great Cthulhu wakes up, all order will return to the beginning. Nick Fury heard this and stepped forward quickly, and asked sharply a few steps away from Robert. Who is Cthulhu? What kind of creatures are you? And what was the original order? Robert Ho-Ho laughed strangely, weird and ugly. Cthulhu is the great old dominator. I am a believer of the great Cthulhu. The initial order is the first order, and when the old ruler returns, you will understand. Old dominators. Another term that puzzled Nick Fury. But then let Nick Fury ask no more, Robert never spoke again. This annoyed Nick Fury, who first ordered Robert to be locked up in a closed transparent prison, and then sent someone to recover the Cthulhu statue. The death of 29 experts is extremely saddening to Nick Fury. But now nothing can be said to get it back. Fortunately, there is an additional living monster that can be used for research. To a certain extent, this can barely make up for the pain in Nick Fury's heart. At this moment, Natasha came to the underground laboratory. She glanced at Robert, who had been taken away, and then came to Nick Fury's side and said, Fury, I have information here, I'm sure you'll be very interested. Nick Fury looked up at the other person, and then Natasha took out her phone and clicked on a message. London Christie's auction will open, the Mystery Collection finale. Auction? Nick Fury was slightly puzzled, and then Natasha turned to the bottom of the news. That's the introduction to this auction. It mentions some information about the finale collection. It was a book. It's called The Book of the Dead. And below the Book of the Dead, there is also the evaluation of it by a certain auction high ranking. I have experienced countless auctions of treasures in my life, but if I had to choose which one is the most rare, then I would not hesitate to choose this book. This is an extremely mysterious book, but also an extremely dangerous book. After repeated tests by our auction house, anyone who stares at this book for more than half an hour will have a strange hallucination, and we still don't understand what kind of mystery is involved. Perhaps, as mentioned in the book, it is the great Cthulhu and other old rulers who are influencing us. If you have guests who like mythological stories, this book is definitely a treasure you can't miss. Maybe there is really some kind of secret hidden in it. In the usual way, this seemingly exaggerated marketing language would never have made Nick Fury pay more attention to it. But at this moment, Nick Fury's expression was extremely serious. He said immediately, Go to London. Episode 15. Not long after Nick Fury said go to Lomond, Natasha set off again. This time, her target was the ancient book called The Book of the Dead. In S.H.I.E.L.D., Nick Fury came to Robert, who was being held in a transparent prison. The restraints on Robert's torso were not lifted. But the restraints on the feet were removed. The moment he saw Nick Fury walk in, he immediately rushed over. But fortunately, the transparent prison is strong enough. Nick Fury's face did not change in the face of this scene, and he looked at Coulson on the side and said, This monster is over to you, and I hope to hear some good news from you in a day. Coulson frowned a little when he heard this. Let's hope that the conventional human interrogation methods will work for him. Coulson said with a shrug. I also need to know the reason for his mutation. This. Well, I'll try to find out the truth. Coulson, though a little embarrassed, accepted the order. Then Nick Fury turned and left here. Coulson looked at Robert in the transparent prison and smiled. Normal fish will become ripe when they encounter high temperatures. I don't know if a fishman monster like you will be. Robert was a little alarmed when he heard this, but he still showed anger and contempt. He kept cursing in his mouth, but the soles of his feet gradually came with heat. New York, Brooklyn. Liang is still a day as usual. There are not many customers in the bookstore, and the business is not very easy to do. But he didn't care about any of that. When he used the power of the system to see everything that happened in S.H.I.E.L.D. today, the corners of his mouth curved slightly. It was as if I had finished watching a good play. Robert's transformation into a diver had nothing to do with him. All he did was give the statue of Cthulhu some weird properties. He will not sit idle and fall with an ordinary person. But I have to say that this little episode still made Liang feel very unexpectedly fun. It's like watching a TV series. If an unexpected plot occurs under the premise that you know the entire plot, even if it does not play any role in affecting the direction of the plot, this small accident is enough to make the body feel the fun of novelty. Liang is now more and more able to assume the identity of the audience. Although he is also the director and screenwriter of the TV series. As soon as Leon thought about it, Natasha's picture appeared in front of him. She is disguised as a rich lady. Looking at the figure of the other party, Liang was also thinking about something in his heart. When the Book of the Dead is taken back by them, this fabrication may be over. According to the system's prompts, the end time of Liang's fabricated story can be completely controlled by himself, and then the system will settle all aspects involved in this fabrication. This is still very good for Liang. There is no time limit, which means that the process of fabrication can be more free. Like this fabrication, it has been close to a month in time. However, time is not the main reason why Leon decided to end this fabrication. Mainly because even if it continues to develop, there will be no good gains. Because Liang prepared only 2 props for this fabrication. One is the statue of Cthulhu and the other is the Book of the Dead next. Other than that, he didn't do anything bigger. On the one hand, it is hindered by the review mechanism of the system, and on the other hand, it is hindered by his 0 influence points. To create something peculiar, you have to rely on influence points. There is a certain rule involved. The scarcity of the number of props will naturally determine the development of the story. Just like a TV series, no matter how good the director and screenwriter is, he can't stand without the protagonist and supporting role. But for now, the impact has made Liang quite satisfied. The commotion of more than 200,000 believers in Barnstable County and the bloody incident of S.H.I.E.L.D., these 2 alone were enough for Liang to gain a large number of influence points. Not to mention that Natasha and others are involved in this. Don't forget that the system will also give additional influence points based on the identity of the characters involved in the final settlement. As one of the protagonists of the Marvel series, Natasha and others have no reason not to be valued extra by the system. Liang thought of this and stopped his thoughts slightly. He took a sip of tea. His gaze also saw the newspaper on the table. There is information about the Christie's auction in London. Liang couldn't help but laugh in his mind. This group of London people is really bold. Obviously tested the weirdness of the Book of the Dead, but still chose to auction. It's really for the money. Episode 16. The door of the bookstore was opened. Once again, familiar guests walked in. Looking at Matt with a bruised face, Liang was not surprised. Others don't know, but he does. The seemingly thin blind lawyer in front of him would go out every night to fight righteously. But unlike Spider-Man, who faces the crushing of common criminals, Matt, whose physical fitness is more inclined to ordinary people, is still a lot when he is beaten. Matt, what's going on with the injury on your face? Liang pretended to be surprised and asked. Matt Murdock laughed and lied. Accidentally hit a pillar last night. Liang laughed in his heart when he heard this. Come on. I saw you attacked by gangsters last night. However, Liang did not debunk the meaning of the other party. He said with a little helplessness in his tone. Life for blind people is really hard. Matt smiled and didn't continue the topic. He went to the counter to return the book he had borrowed some time ago, and then went to the bookshelf to find the next book. After a while, he came to Liang with a braille book on chemistry. I found that the books you read are really complicated, and each subject has to involve a little bit, huh? Liang said while scanning the barcode on the back of the book. I'd just like to know more. Matt laughed. Then Liang handed the book to the other party. It's still the old rule, remember to keep the book intact when returning it, the 3-day statute of limitations, and you need to pay $1 as compensation for each day that exceeds it. Lee, I'm curious if you really don't lose money if you provide a book lending service like you? What if the other party doesn't return the book? In beautiful countries, books are actually very expensive things. Entertainment books like novels also have a minimum starting price of $10. For example, subject books with professional knowledge can easily cost hundreds or even thousands of dollars. Therefore, the general small bookstore rarely has the service of lending out. Liang's service is relatively rare. If you don't return the book, call the police. I have your identity here, Matt. You have to trust the police of the beautiful country. Liang said cheerfully. This. All right. Matt was a little speechless for a moment. Trust the police in American? Well, Matt would rather trust his grandmother. As the two were talking, there was a sudden commotion on the street outside the bookstore. Through the windows of the bookstore, you can see people marching together. What's wrong with this? Liang asked casually. Matt sighed helplessly and said, It's just a march of religious believers. Do you remember the Massachusetts riots some time ago? Of course, the scene comparable to the melee in the Middle East is really unforgettable. A religious group was said to have been behind the riot, and although the riot has subsided, other religious groups believe that the riot was caused by excessive interference by the authorities in religious freedom, and they began to march. It is a beautiful country of freedom. Liang's ridicule is extremely obvious, but fortunately Matt is a sensible young man with brains. In the face of Liang's ridicule, he highly agreed. Matt then left the bookstore with the book. Liang walked out of the store with great interest to watch the religious procession. It was mixed with all kinds of men and women, all very excited. Liang couldn't help but sigh. The beautiful country has such a good foundation of chaos. If he doesn't make more trouble in the back, he is sorry for such a good atmosphere. A day later, Natasha flew back from London. The trip to the auction went well, but it cost a lot. The final sale price of the Book of the Dead was as high as $12 million. This was something that Natasha did not expect. But this money is reimbursed by Congress anyway, it doesn't matter. As for the content of the Book of the Dead, Natasha also read it. It did mention information such as Cthulhu, and when Natasha flipped through it, she had a similar mental disorder as when she looked at the statue of Cthulhu. But compared to the impact of the evil statue, the impact of this book is weaker. But that's just relative to the statue. If a normal person reads too much of this book, it is still very dangerous. She returned to S.H.I.E.L.D. and reported all the information she had obtained to Nick Fury. When Nick Fury heard this, he immediately asked an expert in Old English to translate the book. This time he gave very strict orders. Each expert is allowed to view the book for no more than 10 minutes, and no less than 10 security personnel must be in the vicinity. He didn't want anything like Roberts to happen again. As soon as the order was given, the translation operation began. And with the deepening of the translation step by step, an unknown and terrifying world unfolded in front of Nick Fury and others. Episode 17. Inside Nick Fury's office. The Brine Egg looked seriously at the partial translation of the Book of the Dead placed in front of him. The manuscript written in ordinary English feels an unusual weirdness. If Nick Fury hadn't experienced the Cthulhu statue, he would have just dismissed this translation as a wild babble written by someone who had committed a crime. But he went through it. Even if I haven't personally felt the weirdness of the Cthulhu statue. But he witnessed the horrific conditions of those who came into contact with the statue of Cthulhu. A madman-like fanatic, a mutated fishman monster, a dreamlike whisper. These scenes made the man, known as the King of Agents, feel an unknown and terrifying threat. And now the Book of the Dead appears. It magnifies this threat several times deep in his heart. Now Nick Fury no longer suspects that Hydra is behind this. Because if Hydra really has the ability to transform Robert into a monster without knowing it. So what are they hiding for? Nick Fury looked at the contents of the manuscript, his scalp tingling a little. It was a crazy text written by a person named Watley Dale. First, a preface. As a member of a family with a heritage, I accidentally saw this book, and I was attracted by the magnificent world and infinite knowledge described in it, so in order not to lose this ancient Arabian treasure, I decided to translate it in Old English. This is followed by the text content. I still believe that the greatest luck for human beings is ignorance. No matter how far the times have evolved, when human beings look up at the stars and the dark universe, they should always maintain awe and fear. No one knows that in the outer layer of the universe, in the unknowable chaos, there is lurking the most terrifying existence in the world. But I was chosen, and I was chosen by the terrifying being of the underworld to be the wretched one who recorded this. Ah, how sad, really miserable, despair and death are waiting for me in the near future. That eternal being does not die, but in a strange eternity, even death dies. I saw that in the depths of chaos, an eternal immortal being was sleeping, his name was, and I couldn't mention his name. The Great One, the Conqueror of Terror, the end of time and space, the key to the door of all, Yug, please forgive me for my mention of your name. The Great Mother God of Mercy, the Mother of all things, the Black Goat of the Forest who gives birth to thousands of descendants. Simply looking at these words, people can already feel that the spirit of the original author at that time should be abnormal. But the subsequent records show the original author's madness and whispering. And this follow-up content is the object that Nick Fury focuses on the most. Because that's the text about Cthulhu. Look high in the sky, it will arrive when the stars reach their right place, the old time is gone, the destruction will come because of him, the seal will be gradually damaged, and the old rulers will be revived. Awaken, tremble, when you return, the darkness reappears. Rise from the bottom of the sea, Lalai. Lalai. Great Cthulhu sits upright on top. Endless tentacles, crazy clothes, broken wings, later people shout, great gods. Shouting. The deep diver will serve as a whistle and sound the trumpet of the recovery of the great old dominators. Nick Fury looked at the words for a long time speechless. After a long silence, he cast his gaze on Natasha and Coulson in front of him. Tell me, what do you guys think? Nick Fury asked. Natasha frowned. If it is understood in this book, it means that there is a group of terrifying gods behind this universe, and Cthulhu is a representative of this group of gods, which is called the Old Dominator, sealed on the earth, and when it wakes up, everything will be destroyed. Coulson went on to add. Yes, the experts also analyzed it, and they also believe that the deep divers mentioned in the book are Cthulhu believers. Nick Fury thought for a moment, and then he said. Read the book about Cthulhu to Robert and see how he reacts, and use the book to try to study the statue again. Yes, Chief. Coulson immediately complied. But before he could walk out of the office, Nick Fury stopped him again and asked. Do you have an eyebrow about the cause and effect of Robert's mutation? There are some. I originally planned to report to you after doing the test. Oh. What did you find? Through repeated slowdown observation of the surveillance at that time, we found that Robert's right index finger had lightly wiped the statue when he fell, and then Robert wiped his right index finger with his hand, and we observed that there was blood on his right index finger at that time. So we suspected that it was because of blood contact that caused Robert's mutation. Coulson's reasoning made Nick Fury nod slightly. Okay, I'll give you the authorization for the overspecification experiment, and report the results to me after you get them. Nick Fury said grimly. Coulson's face was startled, and he immediately responded. Overspec experiment licensing is the name of S.H.I.E.L.D., which has a more understandable name. Authorization of human experiments. Coulson then left. When only Nick Fury and Natasha were left in the office, Nick Fury spoke. Natasha, what would we do if there really was such a group of terrifying enemies behind our world? I don't know. I have an idea, but I need you to join me. Nick Fury looked at Natasha, his eyes serious and solemn. At this moment, the idea of forming the Avengers in Nick Fury's heart was extremely strong. Episode 18. When Natasha left. Nick Fury relooked at the translation of the Book of the Dead. But this time his focus was on that preface. According to the preface, Whatley Dale is not the real author of the book, he is only a translator. The original text of the book is in Arabic. Nick Fury wanted to find the original of the book. But as of now, he still knew nothing about the original author of the Book of the Dead. The experts of S.H.I.E.L.D. have translated all the Book of the Dead obtained, and it does mention information about the original author. But just as the words in this book that deal with the existence of terror are widely hidden and smeared, Whatley Dale also smeared the name of the original author. This made Nick Fury very helpless. But there is also a useful piece of information. That is, this original author is at least an ancient Arab. But the scope of the ancient Arab world is so large. In such a vast land, look for an ancient book that I don't know how many years ago. This is finding a needle in a haystack. Thinking of this, Nick Fury had to temporarily give up his original plan to find the Book of the Dead. But he also considered another possibility. In addition to the Book of the Dead, are there other books that record information about the old dominators? This led him to set his sights on some of the world's oldest countries and regions. He decided to send agents to these places to collect ancient books. He did not believe that only one Book of the Dead would exist. Otherwise, it is not reasonable. A few more days passed. Coulson's research yielded results. Through the voluntary dedication of several felons, Coulson's team confirmed the relationship between blood and variation. When human blood stains the statue, then humans mutate after a period of deep sleep or lethargy. At the same time, based on this result, Coulson also found that different people have different mutation effects. After comparison, the richer the person himself, the more serious the mutation after the blood stains the statue. Their physical strength will rise to a surprising level, and their mental aspects will become extremely extreme and extreme. The more ignorant the person, the less the degree of mutation. They will also be evolutionarily weak in physical strength, and their mental aspects will not be as extreme as those who have knowledge after mutation. That's why Natasha killed the bishop monster so easily, while Robert could physically resist bullets. There is a significant gap in the knowledge content of the two sides. And this result also made Nick Fury can't help but think of the content in the Book of Deaths. I still believe that the greatest luck for human beings is ignorance. This sentence is confirmed here. Human beings have always been hungry for the advancement of knowledge. But in the face of this evil and strange statue, rich knowledge has become an innate curse. This made Nick Fury think deeply. And after observing the mutated monsters himself, he had a dangerous idea. Can these monsters be used? But the idea was immediately pressed back into his mind. Maybe someday, the idea will pop up again. At that point, maybe he'll actually take action. After observing the monsters, Nick Fury went to see Robert in captivity again. The other party is still bound, but there are obviously many more scars on his body. At the moment of seeing Nick Fury, Robert's killing intent was extremely obvious. But Nick Fury didn't care. Did he confide any more useful information? Then keep it closed. After getting the Book of the Dead, through the recitation of Robert's relevant content, the other party also inadvertently revealed something in surprise. For example, the identity of the self-diver and so on. But it's limited to superficial information. Back in the office, Nick Fury sat alone at his desk, and now the investigation into Cthulhu and the old dominators seemed to have reached an impasse. Without new clues, Robert couldn't spit out anything useful. It made him feel very irritable. He now only hopes that the agents sent out to search for ancient books will bring back some useful clues. While Nick Fury was scratching his head in annoyance. New York, Manhattan. A beautifully dressed woman walked into the Stark building with sexy steps. "Hello, miss, is there anything you need?" Faced with the inquiry at the front desk, the woman smiled. "Hello, my name is Nate, and I'm here to apply for Mr. Stark's secretary position," Natasha said with a smile. Episode 19. New York, Brooklyn. Liang was a little surprised after watching what happened on both sides of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Natasha. He wasn't surprised that S.H.I.E.L.D. was conducting human experiments. It's normal to think about this kind of thing. According to Nick Fury's personality, he is not a simple messenger of justice. This man. When it comes to protecting the Earth, it can be called unscrupulous evaluation. To his surprise, Natasha went to apply for Tony Stark's secretary. According to the plot he knows. This plot should take place after Tony becomes Iron Man. But now it's happening ahead of schedule. After a short thought, Liang figured it out. Presumably, it was because the matter of the Cthulhu statue increased Nick Fury's tension. This prompted the other party to make the decision to form the Avengers in advance, which led to the current plot that happened in advance. However, this is not worth paying too much attention to for Liang. What he cares about most now is the next system settlement. System, end this fabrication. Liang silently said to the system in his heart. Then listen to the system's prompt. Ding, this fabrication has ended, and the results are now officially settled. Settlement. This fabrication investment, 0 impact points. The output of this fabrication, 223,152 ordinary people believe in the existence of Cthulhu, which is converted into 223,152 influence points. 4 important people doubt the existence of Cthulhu, and Nick Fury believes 34%, which translates to 34,000 influence points. Natasha Romanoff's belief level is 67%, which translates to 201,000 impact points. Clint Patton's belief level is 62%, which translates to 124,000 impact points. Phil Coulson's belief level is 71%, which translates to 71,000 impact points. Total output impact points are 653,152 points. Input-output ratio, 653,152 times. Comprehensive Evaluation, SSS. Get an SSS level evaluation reward chest. This fabrication can obtain 1% of the strength of the fabricated image Cthulhu, which is revised to 1/10 of the strength of the fabricated image Cthulhu because it is an SSS level evaluation. Please keep up the good work. Looking at the settlement of the system, Liang was very excited in his heart. Although I don't know what treasures will be opened in SSS level treasure chests, this evaluation alone is enough to show that the treasures are extraordinary. As for the strength that can obtain 1/10 of Cthulhu, Liang was even more surprised. In Gram mythology, Cthulhu has always been sealed in the deep sea of the earth. But if you underestimate the other party because of this, there is something wrong. The reason why the other party was sealed in the earth was because he was hit by the three-pillar god. Facing the three-pillar gods other than Azathos, they are undoubtedly the strongest of the mythological system. To illustrate, for example, when Yog-Sothoth, who has always been mainly silent, spoke, just because of such a small movement, several universes were annihilated. In the face of such a three-pillar god, how can an old ruler like Cthulhu have any sense of existence? But exclude the three-pillar gods and those powerful outer gods. The complete strength of Cthulhu itself is also counted among the old dominators. He was conceived from the body of Nako, son of Yog-Sothoth and Sabu Nicholas. Born with incomparable physical strength. At his strongest, he fought wildly in the universe with his brother Asta. There are countless galaxies that have been flooded by the aftermath of the battle between these two old dominators. It's a pity that in the later stage, he was hit by the three-pillar god by mistake. This led to the other party being sealed in the earth for many years. According to the system's strength level, the opponent is in 3 levels. And if divided by Marvel's strength level, Leon estimated that Cthulhu should be in the level of the monolithic universe. It is also a relatively powerful monolithic universe. Single-handedly can affect the safety of the entire universe. In this way, 1/10 of the opponent's strength is considerable. Ding, may I ask if the host is now receiving 1/10 of Cthulhu's strength? Faced with the system's questioning, Liang did not answer immediately. He was still in the city, and he was worried that it would be very bad if something happened when he was receiving his strength. The thought moved. Liang came to a space beyond Earth. Complete second-order abilities include many abilities, such as teleportation. Pick it up, Liang said silently in his heart. Then an extremely terrifying force was instilled into his body. There was a great power that could easily crush the stars in that power, and Liang couldn't help but let out a soft whisper at this moment. And when he whispered, the power that inadvertently scattered from him actually shattered some asteroids. Even this space has a sense of stagnation. If there are creatures here, I am afraid that their bodies will be shattered by this sense of stagnation in the next second. This is just a leak of a little power, but it is already terrifying. When Liang finally accepted this huge power, he couldn't help but show a cheerful look on his face. Out of curiosity, he came to the nearest planet. The size of the planet was as large as half an Earth, but it was a dead silence. Leon made his body as large as a mountain range, and then tried to lift the planet purely with physical strength. In the end, the result turned out to be easy as usual. At this moment, Leon finally realized how invincible Cthulhu's terrifying physical strength was. After completing the test, Liang left the place satisfied. And the next moment, when his figure disappeared, a bald woman in a yellow robe appeared here. With a solemn and serious expression, she looked at the stars around her who were disturbed by mysterious powers. At this moment, Gu-Yi was more vigilant than ever. Such a mysterious, terrifying existence appeared outside the Earth. This made her, the Supreme Mage, feel great pressure. In addition to Gu-Yi, other eyes in the universe also cast their gaze here. Episode 20. Asgard. Inside the Golden Palace, Odin, who was sitting on the throne, was clearly aware of the powerful power fluctuation that had just flashed from the universe. That fluctuation, even he held Gungnir in his hand, felt palpitations. This made his expression a little solemn. After ordering Heimdall to investigate, he waited for Heimdall's response. But just when Odin was anxious, his son Thor stood up wielding Mjolnir. Father, Feng Kai's force appeared in our jurisdiction. This is obviously our provocation. I think it is necessary to send troops to warn the other party. I am willing to be this leader. Looking at his son's thick muscles, Odin sighed in his heart. Although he has some preference for Thor, this child's brain really makes him feel helpless. Thor, are you rusty in your brain? You didn't feel the fluctuation of power just now. Just how do you compete with the other party? On the other side, Loki taunted Thor. Thor immediately retorted. Although I can't resist the other party, we still have a father, and with my father's divine power, no one can stop it. Thor, who has not yet been tempered, is still extremely naive at this time. Seeing that Loki was about to speak sarcastically again, Odin opened his mouth and said, "Shut up both of you, I have my own opinion." Yes. Both Thor and Loki stood back in place. At this moment, Heimdall's response reached Odin's mind. Didn't find the existence of the other person. Go ahead and monitor the universe, increase your efforts to the area where the power appears, and notify me immediately if you notice anything unusual. Yes. After communicating with Heimdall in his mind, Odin sighed softly. This universe really can't let him relax for a moment. Then he looked at Thor and Loki. According to what he had thought before, the two children would grow up over time. But now he has changed his mind. Maybe it's time to let them undergo some trials early. Kree Empire. Ronan also noticed the powerful force fluctuation that occurred in space. This made him care. Right now, he was planning how to destroy Shandar and had to turn to Thanos. But Thanos' attitude made him very dissatisfied in private. If you can find the source of Fongai's power. Ronan thought he might not have to rely on Thanos. Therefore, he sent many scouts. He didn't care how long the search was, after all, he had endured it for so many years. As long as he can achieve the goal in his heart, he is willing to give time and effort. Aboard the Templar II battleship. The purple-skinned Titan slowly walked across the deck of the battleship, and the stars of the universe were his background. When this Titan stood in the center of this universe, the brilliant universe seemed to be incomparable to the strong sense of existence he carried. He has a name that is feared by all things in the universe. Thanos. Lord Thanos, Fongai's fluctuations have been detected, and it happened in the galaxy. The ugly-looking and extremely strange ebony throat stood beside Thanos and said humbly. Thanos' complexion remained unchanged. Don't worry about it for now, continue to search for gems. Thanos said lightly. His dull and majestic voice matched this old and dead universe perfectly. It was as if the Emperor gave orders in his own hall. Ebony bowed respectfully, then disappeared his figure. And Thanos' eyes were fixed on the empty universe in front of him. No one could understand what he was thinking. Liang, who returned to Earth, did not realize that his behavior had attracted the attention of many forces in the universe. But if he knew, Liang would not be afraid of this. At most, it will be a little helpless to their own carelessness. After receiving Fongai's strength, his strength level reached 3 levels. Although it is only the beginning of the third order. But this strength is barely enough to see in the entire universe. And in addition, Liang still has a shelter to protect him. Basically stable. But having said that, if Liang is really allowed to choose, he will still choose to continue to lurk and continue to scruple. Isn't it good to wait until you are truly invincible and then come out and wave? Intoxicating power for a moment will only bring about a rollover, and only to the end is victory. Leon returned to the bookstore again. He set his gaze on the SSS level evaluation chest in his backpack. After praying a few words in his heart, he opened the treasure chest. The system prompts in response.